I am Meghan Darling-White, and I'm a postdoctoral trainee at the Waisman Center at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And my talk will be geared primarily towards those who are PhD students now and early postdocs. So all you junior faculty out there, stick with me, and I promise there'll be some tidbits of things that I learned that will apply to you later on in the talk. So, like I said, I came to Lessons for Success in 2012, and at the time I had a funded F-31 predoctoral grant from the NIH. And what I did really was try to soak in all the things that I could about how to develop my career and what that really looked like. So when I came, I was really focused on a tenure track position. I was just starting my dissertation and had 1 year left, so it was right at the time where I would be either going on the job market or looking for postdocs. And I wanted to be a tenure track faculty member, just like I still want to. But when I got here, starting actually with these talks, and a common theme throughout was how wonderful a postdoc was and how great that could be for career development. And I thought, wait a second, I haven't even been, the postdoc wasn't even on my radar. Maybe I should really think about this. And some of the things that I'm sure you'll hear again today is that a postdoc can really be this wonderful time in your life where all you're really doing is research. You really don't have service commitments. You don't have teaching commitments. Your commitment is to broadening your research area and developing your programmatic line of research. And another point that got brought up was as jobs in communication sciences and disorders departments kind of become very interdisciplinary. So I'm not just competing with communication sciences and disorders applicants. I'm now competing with psychology, with engineering, with neuroscience, and all of those disciplines, postdocs are very common. So all of a sudden, I'm thrown into a pool where I might have 2 or 3 publications, and I'm really proud of those after my PhD, but it can't compare to the 10 coming out of the engineering department, who's got the postdoc and the PhD. So I talked to my mentor at Lessons for Success, and we talked a lot about kind of the pros and cons of a postdoc. And when I got home, I started thinking really seriously about a postdoc, and here are some of the things I thought about when I was looking for one. So first, I just wanted to identify what was my programmatic line of research, what was going to be the common thread that I wanted to pursue, and really thinking about it in a 5 to 10 year span. So if I thought about what if I was really interested in developing intervention for my career, what did that look like for 5 years, and what did that look like for 10 years? And then I identified what were the skills that I needed to be successful in that programmatic line of research. So what did I need to learn about, and what did I need to broaden and expand into for me to be able to complete those grants and show the reviewers that, yes, I can be successful doing this. I also thought about matching my research interests with my mentor's research interests. And when you're thinking about a postdoc, you both should bring something to the table. So I wanted to bring some skills to a lab that I could maybe have some expertise in an area that my postdoc mentor maybe was interested in but didn't have the expertise in, but then that my postdoc mentor also had expertise that I wanted to learn. And then I thought about how was I going to be funded. There are several different methods of funding. There's a T32, which is an institutional funding grant, an F32, which is an individual grant from the NIH that you and your mentor work with and apply for. And the T32 and F32 are not givens. You have to apply and you have to be awarded them. And that's really different than if you go on to your mentor's funded R01. That's definitely a sure thing. But with that comes different responsibilities. With that, you have to do 20 hours of work on that specific R01, which is maybe not what your independent project is. So you have to think about all those things. Think about what type of department you're going to be in. So is the postdoc through an interdisciplinary research center? So the postdoc that I have is in an interdisciplinary research center for developmental disabilities. I am not in a communication science and disorder department, and the majority of people I interact with are in psychology and human and health studies. So you have to decide if that's something that you're interested in. And then will there be a cohort of other postdocs? So the postdoc is this kind of different position where you're not quite a faculty member, but you're not a student anymore. Are there going to be people in your peer group who are there to give you support while you transition? So I decided to apply for a postdoc that was a T32. And again, it's an interdisciplinary research center. They accept 2 to 3 postdocs a year. So there was a potential that I would not be awarded this postdoc. So I also went on the job market because you never know. And the other advice I heard here at Lessons for Success is if you were to find your dream job and they were to also want you, you could potentially negotiate for a year delay, go do a postdoc for a year, and then come back to start your faculty position. So when I was looking on the job market, I applied very selectively. I think I only applied to 4 universities that I was very interested in, and they were all R1 research intensive universities. And some of the things that I learned was that everything takes longer than you think it will. So when I sat down to do my research statement that every single application asks you for, I thought, I've been talking about my research for a long time now. I've been doing the same thing. I really love what I do. This will be a piece of cake. And then I looked at a blank screen for 3 hours. And as Lisa Goffman, who was on my doctoral committee and read my research statement many times, can attest, it takes a long time and a lot of drafts. So budget your time accordingly. Start early. The best thing I did was to meet with members of the search committee at ASHA. And this is where you can really learn what that department is looking for. So there was a position I applied for that the position description was really open. It was kind of like, we'll take anyone. But when I met with them at ASHA, they told me they were really looking for an aphasia researcher. Well, I knew right away I was not going to get an interview there. And that was okay with me. I knew that I could just cross that off my list. It was incredible practice selling yourself. It's really different than writing a manuscript or doing a conference presentation. Selling your vision of research what was very difficult to start with, but I think I'm much better at it now after all the practice. And then I did get an interview, and it really demystified this dreaded academic interview. I went to lots of workshops. I gave my job talk. But until you go on an interview, you really don't know how it's going to go. And I'm so glad that I've got that experience under my belt now. And when I go on the job market again, I can say, okay, I've done this before. This isn't as horrible as I probably think it's going to be. At least I hope not. So my experience on the job market, I got one of the universities was looking for someone totally not in my area. One of the universities suspended their search. So I had 3. I really was a contender for 3 jobs. I got one of the interviews, so 1 out of 3 is not so bad. But all of the jobs everybody that got those positions either had a postdoc or was already an assistant faculty member at another university. So I was very thankful then that I got the postdoc. There was a couple weeks in there that I was like, oh, I'm never going to have anything. Oh my gosh, my husband's going to kill me. So, but I got the postdoc. So now that I've got the postdoc, I've got to make the most out of it. And right now my postdoc is for 2 years. So this is what the timeline looks like. It's a fall, a spring, a summer. Then you enter the job market. Looking at this actually makes me stressed out a little bit. So you have to remember that when you get somewhere and you're transitioning, it's going to take some time. So basically, the first arrow is knocked out. The fall is kind of it's productive in that I made a lot of plans, I read a lot of background information, but the spring is where you start to go. And if you're going to enter the job market that second fall, you need data and you need it fast. So develop a plan as soon as possible. And what I did is kind of split my plan into 3 arms: the research development, the professional development, and then, of course, grant development. So for my research development, you really want to identify the skills that you want to acquire and then make a plan to acquire them. So that was probably the first couple weeks I sat down with my postdoc mentor and said, these are the things that I want to learn from your lab. And then I made a plan for how I was going to do that. And that's really what I spent the entire fall semester on, was learning the data collection skills that I needed to learn, reading the background literature on the types of methods that she was using that I wasn't as familiar with. And then, of course, while I was doing that, I was kind of choosing my postdoc projects. And you need to choose them very carefully. So you always, always, always want to be thinking about your programmatic line of research. There will be things going on in your postdoc lab that you think are really interesting, but that do not fit in your programmatic line. So if I went and started looking at maternal response to augmentative and alternative communication, while that is very interesting and I love hearing about it in our lab meetings, totally does not fit in my programmatic line. And if I did a project in that, someone would look at my application and think, wow, this person does not know what they want to do. We are not hiring her. Then you also want to identify projects using your mentor's existing data set. You need data right away. You need to be able to present something in your job application and then at a job interview. And independent research projects take a while to get off the ground, even if you are planning and starting that plan right away in the fall. Again, start planning your independent project right away. So what I would do in my dissertation is when I was glazed over and did not want to read anything about Parkinson's disease anymore, I would pick up a paper on cerebral palsy, and it was like a breath of fresh air. And I didn't do it a lot. I just did it occasionally. But it gave me enough information about the area that I was transitioning into to have a really solid research question when I showed up at Wisconsin. And I could start planning my independent project right away. And then you want to think about how each project sets you up for the future. So right now, I am thinking, what is the data that I'm going to collect to write the F-32? I'll talk about that in a second. And then how is that F-32 going to transition me into an RO3? And I'm even thinking about already what my RO1 is going to be. So all of these things that I am doing will lead into each other to hopefully be successful in the big RO1. For professional development, one of the things that I didn't really think about when I did a postdoc, but which I have absolutely loved, is taking the time to transition out of student mode. You have graduated. You are now a colleague. You might be at the very low end of the totem pole, but you're not a student anymore. And this is the time to ask questions of your mentors, of your advisors, of the people in the department, of what academia is really like. So when part of my postdoc program is we have a professional development series every Friday. And the topics have ranged from academic politics to mentoring to interviewing. And the information that I have gotten now as a postdoc and not a student is completely different and a totally different view than when I was a student. They don't want to scare you away from academia when you're a PhD student. But now I'm getting a much more realistic picture. And I still want to go into academia. I still want to be a faculty member. But it's really different. And one of the things that I didn't think about when I was a graduate student, but I'm thinking about now, is learning how to mentor graduate students. What kind of mentor do I want to be? Do I want to have a really big lab? Do I want to have a small lab? How much time do I want to invest in each one of my students? Learning about mentoring, you really can't do that until you are out. And it makes you really appreciate what your doctoral mentor and all your doctoral committee advisors went through to get you to where you are. Attend as many job talks as possible. Go to practice talks by postdocs. Go to any sort of faculty interview. I think before I had graduated, I had seen maybe 2 job talks. And when I was going to those, I wasn't thinking, oh, you framed that argument really well, or that slide looks really nice. I was thinking, oh, this information, this research is interesting. But now when I go to job talks, I'm not there necessarily for the research of the job talk. I'm there to learn how to frame a job talk. What makes a good job talk versus a bad job talk. Observe different styles of teaching. So what I did when I started at the University of Wisconsin is I identified the people who were teaching the classes that I could potentially teach, and I emailed them and asked if I could sit in. And I'm not going to learn. I already know the material, but sitting in an undergraduate class and watching Gary Weismer talk about motor speech disorders, I learned a lot about how to teach about motor speech disorders. So take those opportunities. This is when you're going to do that. You're not going to be able to do that as an assistant professor. And network. If you are presented with an opportunity to meet someone new, you should take it. And it doesn't matter what that opportunity looks like. So one of the things that the Wasteman Center does is every Friday they have a different person from various universities come to talk about their research. And one of the opportunities postdocs get is to drive them around. I always volunteer. It does not matter if you are from communication sciences and disorders or what university you're at. I volunteer every single time. I think I drove Alana Plant around. I've driven tons of, we threw some ice, I think. So take those opportunities. I literally get 5 to 10 minutes of FaceTime with that person, but you will never know when that will come in handy. This is what I'll talk about the most of the time is really grant development. So I was told it would be really a waste of time if you didn't write a grant in your postdoc, that you have all this time to do research and you should do it. So these are all the things that I learned here was to start early. So I would like to submit a grant in August of 2012. I started planning in September of 2013. So what I did is I developed my general grant concept, and I outlined what I wanted my specific aims to be. And then I researched what grant mechanism was appropriate. There are a couple open to postdocs or transitioning from a postdoc to an assistant faculty job. So I spoke to former postdocs. I spoke to my program officer. I just got as much information as I possibly could and ultimately decided to write an F-32 to extend my postdoc for another year. And then I started thinking about how I was going to convince those grant reviewers that I was qualified to complete the proposed project. And what I did was make a list of the publications and all the manuscripts that I needed to get out, and I ranked them based on what I was going to do in my grant. So I have a manuscript from my dissertation that is about speech intelligibility. Speech intelligibility is going to be in my grant. I need that paper out. But I have another paper about balancing cognition in Parkinson's. I'm not doing anything like that in my grant, so that's a little bit lower in priority. While I'm still getting that out, that's not the first one I'm going to focus on. You need to think about what research experience you need, and then be kind of shoring up consultants and mentors because you may need a little time to convince people to work with you. And then do you need pilot data? So create a reasonable timeline for getting pilot data and factor in the time it takes to get an IRB approved. If you are doing human subjects, or I guess animal work too, you need that IRB, and it takes a long time. And you're now navigating a completely new IRB system. You need to get it done. Get feedback early and often. So ask colleagues outside of your area and give them plenty of time. You don't want somebody to rip apart your grant the week before it's going to go in. Give them lots and lots and lots of time. Meet with your university grant specialist. So learn about the submission system. How early do you need to get that grant in? And be flexible. So when I got to Wisconsin, I wanted to do an intervention study. I had a great idea. I outlined exactly how I was going to do my methods, and I started writing my specific aims, and then Susan Ellis Weismer read it. And she read my specific aims and found several holes in my theoretical background. So I thought, okay, I'm gonna rewrite it. So I rewrote it, sent it back to her, and she pointed out the exact same holes. Well, what turns out, the holes that she was pointing out was where I actually needed to start. So there were holes not because I wasn't arguing it, it was because the data wasn't there. So I completely scrapped the entire project that I had been working on since September and started over again, which meant a new IRB, a new specific aims, but because I started planning so early, I still have plenty of time to make an August deadline. So be flexible and be willing to start over again. And then plan for the waiting period. So what are you going to do while you wait for your grant to get reviewed? And plan to have it go in a second time. I never think that my grant will be accepted the first time. It wasn't on my F-31. I doubt it will be on my F-32. So what am I going to do during that waiting period? And then just some final thoughts. So be open to the possibilities. If you had told me at the beginning of my master's degree that I would have transitioned from Parkinson's disease to kids with cerebral palsy, I would have told you you're insane. And Lisa Goffin can back me up on this. I hated kids, never wanted to work with them. Lisa tried it the whole time and ended up, Lisa won in the end. When I told her I was applying to the Wasteman Center, she was like, really? Are you sure you want to do that? So, but if I had not been open to the possibility when the opportunity arose, I would have missed a really wonderful career development opportunity. And then get a life. So for a long time, my life felt like this. And for a while in your dissertation, that's all you can do. You have to graduate. You have to finish. But now, as a postdoc, you can start doing all the things that you like to do again. And don't be so hard on yourself. So there are lots of things that you'll learn in this conference about how to be productive, how to structure your time, all of the things that you need to do to be successful. And some of them really work for me, and some of them don't. And I wish I could write 2 hours every single day, but that doesn't work for me. I am much better with longer amounts of time in shorter bursts. But for a while, I felt like a failure because I couldn't write every day for 2 hours. But you just need to accept the way that you work and figure out what you can do to be successful.